Chapter 1. The Enigmatic Invitation. Hercule Poirot sat in his impeccably ordered London flat, the morning light filtering through the curtains onto his polished shoes. It was a crisp autumn day, and he had just finished arranging his collection of patent leather footwear with the satisfaction of a man who appreciated symmetry. The post had arrived, and among the usual bills and invitations to dull society events lay a single envelope that caught his eye. It was heavy cream paper, sealed with crimson wax bearing the imprint of a grapevine entwined around a chalice. The handwriting on the front was elegant, almost aristocratic, addressed to Monsieur Hercule Poirot, Detective Extraordinaire. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Few people dared such flattery in writing. He slit the envelope with his silver letter opener and unfolded the letter. Château Vignoble, Bordeaux, France. 15th of October. Dear Monsieur Poirot, I have long admired your unparalleled genius in unravelling the most tangled of mysteries. It is with some reluctance that I write to you now, for I am not a man who easily admits to fear. Yet fear is what I feel. Strange things have been happening here at my ancestral home. Shadows move in the ancient wine cellar where no living soul should be. Bottles of priceless vintage have vanished or been tampered with. My household whispers of a curse, of ghosts seeking vengeance for old sins. I do not believe in ghosts, monsieur, but I do believe in danger. I implore you to come at once. Discretion is essential. I have not informed the local authorities, for the matter touches upon family secrets I would prefer to keep buried. Your fee will be generous, and I shall place the entire resources of the estate at your disposal. Please reply by return, or better yet, come yourself. The train from Paris to Bordeaux is swift, and my car will meet you at the station. Yours in urgency, Comte Philippe de Vignoble Poirot, folded the letter carefully and placed it on the small table beside his armchair. He stroked his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. A chateau in Bordeaux, renowned for its wines. Shadows in the cellar. Vanishing bottles. A comte who did not believe in ghosts but feared something nonetheless. Curious, he murmured to himself. Most curious. He had been idle for several weeks, and idleness did not suit Hercule Poirot. His little grey cells demanded exercise. A trip to the French countryside, surrounded by fine wine and, perhaps, fine mystery. This was not to be refused. He summoned George, his unflappable valet, who appeared with the silent efficiency of a well-trained shadow. George, prepare my valise, the small one, with the grey suit and the new overcoat. We depart for France tomorrow. Very good, sir, George replied without a flicker of surprise. Shall I pack the patent leather shoes as well? All of them, Poirot said firmly. One never knows when one might need to make an impression. The following afternoon found Poirot aboard the boat train to Paris, then onward to Bordeaux. He travelled first class, of course, sipping a small tisane and observing his fellow passengers with mild interest. There was a young couple clearly eloping, an elderly lady with a suspicious amount of luggage, and a businessman who kept checking his watch as though expecting disaster. None of them, Poirot decided, were as interesting as the mystery awaiting him. The car sent by the Comte was a sleek black Renault, driven by a taciturn chauffeur in livery. As they wound through the rolling vineyards of Bordeaux, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet. The air carried the faint, sweet scent of ripening grapes. Château Vignoble rose dramatically at the end of a long gravel drive lined with ancient oaks. It was a magnificent building, part medieval fortress, part Renaissance palace, with towers, turrets, and walls of golden stone. Ivy clung to the facade, and the windows glowed warmly against the gathering dusk. The chauffeur opened the door, and Poirot stepped out, adjusting his Homburg hat. A tall, silver-haired man awaited him on the grand stone steps. He was perhaps 60, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, with the bearing of old nobility. His face was handsome but drawn, the eyes shadowed with worry. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, extending a hand, "I am Philippe de Vignoble. You honour my house with your presence." Poirot bowed slightly. "Comte, it is my pleasure. Your letter intrigued me greatly." The Comte managed a thin smile. "Then let us hope your journey proves worthwhile. Come inside. You must be fatigued." The interior of the chateau was as grand as Poirot had imagined. High ceilings, tapestries depicting bacchanalian scenes, and marble floors that echoed beneath their footsteps. A fire crackled in the enormous hearth of the entrance hall, casting flickering light on suits of armour and antique furniture. "Dinner will be served in an hour," the Comte said, as a footman took Poirot's coat and hat. "I thought perhaps you would prefer to rest first, but if you wish, I can show you the cellar now. It is where the disturbances have occurred." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The cellar, if you please. I am most eager to begin." The Comte hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, this way." They descended a stone staircase at the rear of the chateau, lit by electric sconces that did little to dispel the gloom. The air grew cooler, damper, carrying the rich, earthy scent of aged wood and fermenting grapes. At the bottom, a heavy oak door stood ajar. "This is the main cellar," the Comte explained, pushing the door open. "It dates back to the 16th century. My family has stored wine here for generations. Some bottles are worth more than most men's houses." Poirot stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. Rows upon rows of racks stretched into the shadows, filled with dusty bottles lying horizontally. The ceiling was vaulted, supported by thick stone pillars. In the centre stood a long tasting table with crystal glasses and a silver candelabrum. "It is magnificent," Poirot said truthfully. "But where are these shadows you speak of?" The Comte gestured toward the far end, where the racks gave way to deeper darkness. "Beyond that archway lies the oldest section. The bottles there are priceless, some from the 18th century, even earlier. It is there that my staff have seen movement, shapes that vanish when approached. And twice now, bottles have been found shattered, as though thrown in rage." Poirot walked slowly toward the archway, his footsteps soft on the stone floor. He peered into the gloom. Nothing moved, only silence and the faint drip of moisture somewhere distant. He turned back to the Comte. "You have searched thoroughly?" "Several times. There are no secret entrances that we know of, no places for an intruder to hide. Yet the disturbances continue." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "And the household? Who resides here besides yourself?" "My sister, Madame Elise Duval, who acts as hostess. My nephew, Etienne, who will inherit one day. My niece Claire, recently returned from Paris. And a few guests, old friends who have come for the harvest season. Also the staff, of course. Loyal, most of them, for generations." Poirot stroked his moustache. "I shall need to speak with them all, in time, but for now, let us go to dinner. One thinks better on a full stomach, non?" The Comte looked relieved. "Of course, this way." As they climbed the stairs, Poirot glanced back once at the dark mouth of the cellar. Somewhere in those shadows, he felt certain, lay the beginning of a most intriguing puzzle. And Hercule Poirot never could resist a puzzle. Chapter 2. Arrival amidst the vines. The Renault purred along the final stretch of the gravel drive, crunching softly beneath the tires as the chateau loomed larger. Hercule Poirot gazed out of the window with approval. The vineyards stretched in perfect rows on either side, the leaves turning gold and crimson in the late afternoon sun. It was, he reflected, a scene of orderly beauty, much like the workings of his own mind when presented with a problem. The car halted before the grand entrance, and the chauffeur opened the door with a discreet bow. Poirot stepped out, inhaling the crisp air, laced with the faint perfume of earth and grapes. The Comte de Vignoble was already waiting on the stone steps, his silver hair catching the light. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, descending to greet him, "you have arrived sooner than I dared hope. Welcome to Château Vignoble." Poirot inclined his head graciously. "The journey was most agreeable, Comte. One appreciates the efficiency of French railways." A faint smile touched the Comte's lips, though his eyes remained troubled. "Come inside. You must wish to refresh yourself after the travel." As they entered the great hall, Poirot's sharp gaze took in every detail. The soaring beamed ceiling, the ancient tapestries depicting the labours of the vine, the polished suits of armour standing sentinel. A fire roared in the massive fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the flagstones. Everything spoke of centuries of wealth and tradition, yet beneath it, Poirot sensed unease. A woman approached them from the far end of the hall. She was perhaps 55, elegantly dressed in deep burgundy silk, her dark hair streaked with silver and coiled severely at the nape of her neck. Her posture was impeccable, her expression composed, but her eyes, sharp and assessing, betrayed a watchful intelligence. "Philippe," she said, her voice low and musical, "you did not tell me our guest had arrived." "My sister, Madame Élise Duval," the Comte introduced. "Élise, this is Monsieur Hercule Poirot." Madame Duval extended a gloved hand. Poirot bowed over it with courtly precision. "Enchanted, madame. Your brother has spoken of you as the gracious guardian of this beautiful house." A flicker of amusement crossed her face. "He flatters me. I merely ensure that the chateau continues to function as it should. We are honoured to receive so distinguished a visitor." Her tone was perfectly polite, yet Poirot detected a faint reserve. He filed it away for future consideration. Before more could be said, footsteps echoed on the marble staircase. A young man descended swiftly, tall, dark-haired, with the restless energy of youth. He was handsome in a careless way, his tie slightly loosened, his expression one of barely concealed impatience. "Uncle," he said, "I heard the car. Is this the famous detective?" "Etienne," the Comte reproved gently. "Manners. Monsieur Poirot, my nephew and heir, Etienne de Vignoble." Etienne gave a quick, almost insolent bow. "A pleasure, monsieur. We have all been waiting with great curiosity to see the man who is going to chase ghosts from our cellar." Poirot regarded him calmly. "Ghosts, monsieur? I deal only in facts. Shadows, perhaps. Motives, certainly. But ghosts? No. Those I leave to others." Etienne laughed, though there was little humour in it. "Then you will be disappointed. There is nothing here but imagination and old wine." "Etienne," Madame Duval said sharply, "that is enough. Monsieur Poirot has only just arrived." The young man shrugged and moved toward the fireplace, where he stood with his back to them, staring into the flames. At that moment, another figure appeared in a side doorway, a young woman of striking beauty. She had golden hair swept up in a simple chignon, and wore a pale green dress that set off her fair complexion. Her eyes were wide and blue, but there was a shadow in them that spoke of recent sorrow. "Claire, ma chérie," the Comte said warmly, "come and meet our guest." The girl approached with natural grace. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, offering her hand, "I am Claire de Vignoble. My uncle has told us so much about you." Poirot bowed again. "Mademoiselle, the pleasure is entirely mine. You have been in Paris, I believe?" Her expression clouded briefly. "Yes, I returned only last week. Paris no longer suited me." There was a story there, Poirot noted. A story of the heart, perhaps. He would learn it in time. The Comte clapped his hands lightly. "Enough standing about. Monsieur Poirot, allow me to show you to your room. Then, if you are willing, I thought we might take a short tour of the estate before dinner." "The light at this hour is particularly fine among the vines. I should be delighted," Poirot replied. The guest chamber was on the first floor, overlooking the vineyards. It was spacious and comfortable, with a four-poster bed, heavy brocade curtains, and a fireplace already laid with logs. Poirot's valise had been unpacked with meticulous care. George would have approved, and his clothes hung neatly in the wardrobe. He spent a few moments arranging his toiletries with precision on the dressing table, then rejoined the Comte in the hall. They stepped out through a side door onto a terrace that ran the length of the chateau. Below them, the gardens sloped gently down to the vineyards proper. The air was cool now, carrying the rich scent of turned earth and fermenting grapes. "Harvest is nearly finished," the Comte explained as they walked along a gravel path. "We have had a good year. The Cabernet Sauvignon is exceptional." Poirot nodded appreciatively. "One hears that vignoble wines command the highest prices at auction." The Comte's face darkened. "They do, which makes the disturbances in the cellar all the more troubling. Some of the bottles affected are from vintages that cannot be replaced." They reached a wrought-iron gate that opened onto the vineyards themselves. Row upon row of vines stretched into the distance, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. Workers moved between them, carrying baskets of the last grapes. "And your guests?" Poirot inquired delicately. "Your letter mentioned old friends visiting for the harvest." "Yes, 2 couples, Dr. Armand Leclerc and his wife Marguerite, who have been friends since childhood, and Monsieur Julien Favre, a wine merchant from Paris, with his daughter Sophie. They arrived yesterday." Poirot's interest sharpened. A wine merchant. Where valuable wine was concerned, commerce often followed close behind motive. As they turned back toward the chateau, a figure emerged from between the vines. A stocky man in working clothes, his face weathered by years in the sun. He touched his cap respectfully to the Comte. "Henri," the Comte greeted him, "all is well." "Yes, monsieur. The last of the Merlot is in, but—" He hesitated, glancing at Poirot. "Speak freely," the Comte said. "This is Monsieur Poirot, who has come to help us." Henri shifted uncomfortably. "It's just, I was checking the old cellar this morning, as you asked. There were footprints again, fresh ones, in the dust beyond the racks. And another bottle moved, one of the 1928s. The Comte's jaw tightened. "Thank you, Henri. Say nothing to the others for now." The worker nodded and moved away. Poirot stroked his moustache thoughtfully. "Footprints, you say? That is most interesting. Human footprints, one presumes." "Undoubtedly," the Comte replied grimly, "which means someone in this house, or very close to it, is playing a dangerous game." They walked in silence for a moment. The sun was sinking now, painting the sky in fiery hues and lengthening the shadows across the vines. As they approached the terrace once more, Poirot noticed movement at one of the upper windows. For a brief instant, he caught sight of a face watching them. Pale, intense, quickly withdrawn. Whose room was that? He made a mental note. Dinner, he reflected, would be most illuminating. 8 people at table. The Comte, his sister, nephew and niece, the 2 couples, and the wine merchant with his daughter. 9, counting himself. 9 suspects, perhaps, or witnesses, or victims. The shadows were gathering, both outside among the vines and within the ancient walls of Château Vignoble. And Hercule Poirot had only just begun to observe. Chapter 3. Whispers of the Past. Dinner at Château Vignoble was served in the long candlelit dining room that overlooked the darkened vineyards. The table was set with exquisite precision. Limoges porcelain, heavy silver, and crystal glasses that caught the light like captured stars. The meal itself was a triumph. Clear consommé, followed by roast pheasant with truffle sauce, and a delicate sorbet to cleanse the palate. Yet beneath the elegance, Hercule Poirot sensed a current of unease, as though everyone present was listening for footsteps that never quite arrived. The full party was now assembled. To Poirot's right sat Madame Elise Duval, composed and watchful. Opposite him was Dr. Armand Leclerc, a stout, genial man in his 60s, with a neatly trimmed beard and a fondness for gesturing with his fork. Beside the doctor sat his wife Marguerite, a faded beauty who smiled too often and said too little. At the far end, Julien Favre, the wine merchant from Paris, held court with a booming voice and shrewd eyes. His daughter Sophie, barely 20, pretty in a sharp, modern way, toyed with her food and glanced frequently at Etienne. Claire de Vignoble sat quietly between her uncle and Madame Duval, her pale face illuminated by the candles. Etienne, placed opposite Sophie Favre, drank more wine than he ate, his mood alternating between sullen silence and sudden bursts of brittle laughter. The Comte, at the head of the table, played the perfect host, but Poirot noted the strain in his smile. Conversation began lightly. Harvest yields, the weather, the excellence of the 1945 vintage that had just been decanted. Yet, as the pheasant was served, the talk drifted, almost inevitably, to the history of the chateau itself. "It is a remarkable place," Dr. Leclerc said warmly, turning to Poirot. "Philippe's ancestors built the foundations in the 14th century. There are stories. Oh, such stories!" The Comte gave a small, dismissive wave. "Old tales, Armand, nothing more." But Marguerite Leclerc leaned forward, her eyes bright. "Not just tales, Philippe. I remember my grandmother telling me about the night in 1789 when the mob came. They say the then Comte hid his finest bottles behind a false wall in the cellar, and that he himself vanished, never seen again." Sophie Favre laughed lightly. "How romantic! A nobleman disappearing into his own wine cellar? Perhaps he's still there, guarding the treasure." Etienne snorted. "More likely, he ran off to England with the gold and left the family to face the guillotine." A sudden silence fell. Madame Duval's knife paused halfway to her plate. "Etienne," she said coldly, "that is not amusing." The young man shrugged. "It's history, aunt. Our great-great something did exactly that. Father told me before he died. Took half the family fortune and abandoned his wife and children. Not exactly noble behavior." The Comte's face had paled. "Your father exaggerated, as he often did. The truth is simpler. The Comte of that time was murdered by revolutionaries. His body was never found. The wine was hidden to protect it, and much of it remains in the old section of the cellar to this day." Poirot listened intently, his small green eyes moving from face to face. Here was fertile ground, old resentments, lost fortunes, missing ancestors. Julien Favre cleared his throat. Speaking of that old section, Philippe, I was hoping you might allow me a glimpse tomorrow. As a merchant, I have heard legends of your 1788 vintage. A single bottle sold in London last year for £30,000. The Comte inclined his head. Of course, Julien. After breakfast, we shall all go down together. It will be instructive. Claire spoke for the first time, her voice soft but clear. I used to play in the cellar when I was small. Grand-père would tell me stories of the hidden Comte, how his ghost walked at night, searching for the treasure he could never take with him. Etienne rolled his eyes. Children's stories to keep you from breaking bottles. But Claire's gaze was distant. I saw him once, a shadow tall and thin, moving between the racks. I was 7. I ran upstairs screaming. Madame Duval reached out and touched her niece's hand. You had a nightmare, chérie, nothing more. Dr. Leclerc chuckled indulgently. Or perhaps the little one had sampled the grapes a little too freely. Laughter rippled around the table, but Poirot noted that it did not reach everyone's eyes. Sophie Favre watched Claire with something like envy. Etienne drained his glass and signalled for more. After the sorbet, port was served with a plate of ancient cheeses. The ladies withdrew to the drawing-room, leaving the men to their cigars. Poirot, who disliked cigars, excused himself politely and joined the ladies sooner than custom demanded. In the drawing-room, coffee was poured from a silver pot. Madame Duval presided over the cups with practised grace. Marguerite Leclerc and Sophie chattered about Paris fashions, but Claire sat apart by the window, staring out into the night. Poirot approached her quietly. Mademoiselle, you are troubled. She started, then offered a wan smile. A little. Coming back here, it stirs memories. My parents died in a car accident when I was 15. This house was my refuge, but also my cage. And now, with these strange happenings, you believe the stories of the ghost? She hesitated. I don't know. When I was in Paris, I tried to forget all of it, the old legends, the family arguments about money. But being here again, I feel watched, as though something unfinished is waiting in the darkness below. Poirot nodded sympathetically. And your cousin Etienne, he resents the past also. Claire glanced toward the door. Etienne resents everything. He believes Uncle Philippe favours me in the will. It isn't true. Uncle has always been fair. But Etienne's father left debts, and Etienne feels the estate should compensate. He drinks too much and says things he shouldn't. At that moment, the men entered. Conversation became general again, but Poirot withdrew to a corner observing. He noted how Julien Favre drew the Comte aside, speaking earnestly in a low voice about wine prices and possible sales. How Dr. Leclerc watched his wife with a faintly anxious expression when she laughed too loudly at Etienne's barbed remarks. How Sophie Favre manoeuvred herself next to Etienne on the sofa, touching his arm as she spoke. And how Madame Duval's gaze continually returned to the door that led toward the rear staircase and the cellar beyond. Later, as the party broke up and guests climbed the grand staircase to their rooms, Poirot lingered in the hall. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the flagstones. The Comte approached him. Monsieur Poirot, a word before you retire. Of course. In the library, behind a closed door, the Comte poured 2 small glasses of Armagnac. I did not wish to alarm the household, he said quietly, but this afternoon, after you arrived, Henri found something else in the old cellar. A single red rose, freshly cut, lying on the stone floor directly in front of the false wall built in 1789. Poirot's eyebrows rose. A rose? Most intriguing. From your gardens? Yes, the bushes are in full bloom still, but no one admits to picking one. And the petals were scattered as though in deliberate pattern. Poirot sipped the Armagnac thoughtfully. A message, perhaps, or a ritual, or simple mischief. Tomorrow, when we visit the cellar together, I shall examine this spot myself. The Comte nodded gratefully. I knew I was right to send for you. Already I feel the burden shared. They parted with polite good nights. In his room, Poirot prepared for bed with his usual meticulous care. But sleep did not come quickly. He lay in the darkness, listening to the old house settle around him. Creaks of ancient timber, the faint whisper of wind through ivy. And beneath it all, he sensed another presence, the weight of centuries, of hidden greed and buried violence. The past, he reflected, was never truly past. It lingered in the stones of old houses, in the blood of descendants, in the dusty bottles of priceless wine. And somewhere in the shadows of the wine cellar, the past was stirring. Tomorrow, Hercule Poirot would begin to listen more closely to its whispers. Chapter 4. The Shadow in the Cellar. The morning broke clear and cool over Château Vignoble, a thin mist clinging to the vineyards like a bridal veil. Breakfast was served in the sunlit morning room. Fresh croissants, confiture de figs and strong coffee. But the conversation was subdued. Everyone knew the plan. After the meal, the entire party would descend to the old wine cellar for the promised tour. Poirot observed the faces around the table with quiet attention. The Comte was courteous but tense. Madame Duval poured coffee with steady hands, yet her eyes flicked repeatedly toward the windows, as though expecting something to appear in the mist. Etienne nursed a black coffee, his pallor suggesting a restless night. Claire seemed fragile, picking at a croissant without appetite. Julien Favre, ever the merchant, chatted animatedly with Dr. Leclerc about vintages and prices, while Sophie listened with half-concealed boredom. Marguerite Leclerc alone appeared cheerful, chattering about the beauty of the gardens. At 10 o'clock, the Comte rose. "Shall we, mes amis? The cellar awaits." They descended the stone staircase in a loose group, the Comte leading with an electric torch in one hand and a large iron key in the other. Poirot followed immediately behind, noting how the temperature dropped with every step. The scent of damp stone and aged oak grew stronger, mingled with the faint, sweet perfume of wine. The main cellar was as Poirot remembered it, vast, orderly, dimly lit by a few electric bulbs strung along the vaulted ceiling. Bottles lay in perfect rows, labels yellowed with age. The group spread out, voices echoing softly. Julien Favre moved along the racks with professional reverence, murmuring prices under his breath. Dr. Leclerc pointed out particular vintages to his wife. Sophie lingered near Etienne, asking questions he answered curtly. The Comte led them deeper, through the stone archway into the oldest section. Here the lighting was poorer, only 2 bulbs, one flickering uncertainly. The racks were older, hand-hewn oak blackened by centuries. Dust lay thick on the floor, except where recent footprints had disturbed it. "Here," the Comte said quietly, stopping before a section of wall that appeared solid stone, but for a faint vertical crack running floor to ceiling. The false wall, built in 1789. Behind it are the bottles hidden during the Revolution, perhaps 50 cases of the finest vintages my ancestor could save. Julien Favre's eyes gleamed. Magnificent! A fortune untouched for over a century and a half. Poirot stepped forward, examining the crack with interest. It was narrow, no more than a finger's width, but perfectly straight. He ran a gloved hand along it. "And the rose?" he asked softly. The Comte indicated the floor directly in front of the wall. "There." Henri swept the petals away, but you can still see the faint stain. A darker patch marred the dusty stone, roughly circular, as though petals had been arranged and then crushed. Claire gave a small gasp. "It's just like the stories Grand-Père told. Offerings to the lost Comte." Etienne scoffed. "Superstitious nonsense." But his voice lacked conviction, and Poirot noticed that he kept to the centre of the passage, away from the deeper shadows. Madame Duval spoke for the first time since descending. "We should not linger. The air is unhealthy here." The Comte nodded and turned to lead them back. At that moment, the flickering bulb gave a final sputter and died, plunging the old section into near darkness. Someone, Marguerite Leclerc, gave a nervous laugh. "Steady," the Comte said calmly, switching on his torch. The beam swept across the racks, catching glints of glass and cobwebs. And then it caught something else. For the briefest instant, the light illuminated a tall, thin silhouette, standing motionless between two racks at the far end of the passage. Cloaked in shadow, featureless, it seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Marguerite screamed, a sharp, piercing sound that echoed off the stone. The torch beam jerked as the Comte started, then steadied, but the figure was gone. Only empty space remained where it had stood. Chaos followed. Marguerite clutched her husband, sobbing. Sophie clung to Etienne. Even Julien Favre had gone pale. "Silence!" Poirot's voice cut through the panic like a blade. "Comte, your torch! Hold it steady, if you please." The Comte obeyed, the beam trembling slightly, but fixed on the spot where the shadow had appeared. Poirot moved forward swiftly, his small feet silent on the stone. He reached the place in moments. Nothing, only racks of ancient bottles and thick dust on the floor. But in the dust, footprints, not the random scuffs of their own party, but a single line of clear impressions leading from the side wall to the exact spot where the figure had stood, then abruptly ceasing. Poirot knelt, examining them closely. The prints were of a narrow shoe, perhaps a man's size 8 or 9. The tread pattern modern, rubber soles with a distinctive wavy design. He looked up. Someone was here moments ago. Someone who knows this cellar well enough to vanish in seconds. Dr. Leclerc, recovering his composure, helped his wife toward the archway. "This is intolerable, Philippe. We should call the police." The Comte's face was grim. "Not yet, Armand. Monsieur Poirot is here. Let us give him time." They returned to the main cellar, where the better light restored some calm. Marguerite accepted a chair and a glass of water, brought by a wide-eyed maid who had heard the scream. The others gathered in a loose circle, speaking in low, agitated voices. Poirot remained in the old section a moment longer, shining the Comte's torch along the side wall where the footprints had begun. There, almost invisible, a section of stone slightly prouder than the rest. He pressed it gently. Nothing, but he was certain. A hidden mechanism, perhaps a pivoting panel. He rejoined the group. "Observations," he announced briskly. "First, the figure was human, not spectral. The footprints prove it. Second, he or she knows of a secret entrance or passage that allows rapid disappearance. Third, the timing was deliberate. The bulb did not fail by chance. Someone loosened it earlier, knowing we would come today." Julien Favre frowned. But why reveal themselves now? Why not remain hidden? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Because, monsieur, the game is escalating. Someone wishes us to be frightened, or perhaps to distract us from something else. Claire spoke softly. The rose. The petals arranged like an offering. It's a warning, or a signature, Poirot murmured. Etienne laughed harshly. Signature of a ghost? Come now, even you can't believe that, Monsieur Poirot. I believe in what I see, monsieur, and what I see are footprints that end in mid-air. A clever trick, but a trick nonetheless. The Comte locked the heavy oak door behind them as they ascended the stairs. Sunlight flooded the upper hall, making the cellar seem like a bad dream. But Poirot knew better. Dreams did not leave footprints and dust. Over luncheon, served early because no one had much appetite, the conversation circled endlessly around the morning's events. Theories abounded. A servant playing pranks, a local thief seeking entrance, even a madman living secretly in the tunnels. Poirot listened, saying little. He noted who spoke most vehemently, Etienne, protesting too much, who remained silent, Madame Duval, her face a mask, who seemed genuinely terrified, Claire and Marguerite. After the meal, he asked the Comte for permission to examine the cellar alone. Take the key, the Comte said wearily, and the torch, but be careful, mon ami. Poirot descended once more into the cool silence. This time he carried a small measuring tape and a powerful electric lantern borrowed from the chauffeur. He went directly to the place where the footprints ended. Kneeling again, he studied the wall opposite. It appeared solid, but when he tapped gently, one section sounded hollow. After 20 minutes of careful searching, his fingers found a small iron ring set flush into the stone at floor level, concealed by centuries of dust. He pulled it. A narrow section of wall, barely wide enough for a slender person, swung inward on silent hinges. Beyond lay a narrow passage, roughly hewn, sloping gently downward. The air was colder, musty. Poirot shone his lantern inside. The passage walls were rough stone, unmarked except for faint scratches, perhaps old tool marks. On the floor, more footprints in the dust, leading away into darkness. He did not follow, not yet. One man alone in unknown tunnels was foolish, even for Hercule Poirot. Instead, he closed the panel, memorizing its exact location, and returned upstairs. As he emerged into the hall, he nearly collided with Madame Duval, who was descending the staircase with a basket of freshly cut roses from the garden. She started slightly. Monsieur Poirot, you are covered in dust. He smiled urbanely, brushing his coat. The cellar is a dusty place, madame, but revealing. Her eyes searched his face for a moment. Then she inclined her head and continued downstairs, the scent of roses trailing behind her. Poirot watched her go, stroking his moustache thoughtfully. The shadow had been seen, the hidden passage discovered. The game, as he had said, was escalating. And Hercule Poirot was now certain. Whatever walked in the wine cellar was no ghost, but a living person with a very human motive. The hunt had truly begun. Chapter 5. The Poisoned Vintage. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of the salon, casting golden pools on the Persian rugs. Hercule Poirot had requested a private word with the Comte after his solitary exploration of the cellar. But the household's agitation from the morning's events made solitude elusive. Guests milled about, voices hushed, replaying the sighting of the shadow in endless speculation. Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, a small cup of tisane balanced on his knee, observing. Etienne paced by the fireplace, gesturing wildly. I tell you, it was a trick of the light. That bulb was faulty. Anyone could see it flickering for minutes. Sophie Favre, perched on the arm of a sofa near him, nodded eagerly. Exactly. Why invent ghosts when there's a simple explanation? Across the room, Claire sat with Marguerite Leclerc, who fanned herself dramatically. Simple? I shall have nightmares for weeks. Philippe, you must do something. The Comte, standing by the window, turned with a reassuring smile. We have Monsieur Poirot. He has already found evidence of a hidden passage. The matter is in capable hands. Poirot inclined his head but said nothing. The passage was a clue, yes, but clues without context were merely dust. Madame Duval entered then, her composure unbroken, carrying a silver tray. To settle nerves, I have prepared a small tasting. A few rare bottles from the main cellar, nothing from the old section, of course. The 1947 Chateau Vignoble, the 1961, and a special 1928 that Henri retrieved this morning. Julien Favre's eyes lit up. Elise, you are a miracle. A tasting now. Perfect. The Comte hesitated. Perhaps not the best. But the group murmured approval, drawn by the promise of distraction. Chairs were arranged around a low table, crystal glasses set out. Madame Duval uncorked the bottles with practised ease, pouring small measures into each. Poirot accepted a glass of the 1947 politely. It was deep ruby, aromatic with notes of blackcurrant and earth. He sipped sparingly, savouring the velvet texture on his tongue. To Chateau Vignoble, Dr. Leclerc toasted, raising his glass of 1961. May its shadows remain only in the cellar. Laughter rippled, brittle but genuine. They sipped and praised the 1947's elegance, the 1961's power. Then came the 1928, a legendary vintage, decanted carefully by Madame Duval. This one, she said, is from just before the disturbances began, priceless. Julien Favre inhaled deeply. Exquisite. Philippe, name your price. I will buy the case. The Comte chuckled. Julien, you know these stay in the family. Glasses were filled. Poirot raised his, noting the wine's mahogany hue, its bouquet of dried fig and spice. He took a cautious sip. Etienne downed his in one gulp. To forgotten ancestors and their silly ghosts. Sophie followed suit, giggling. Claire sipped delicately. Dr. Leclerc savoured his. Marguerite, ever enthusiastic, drank deeply. Moments passed in appreciative murmurs. Then Etienne coughed, clutching his throat. What the devil? It's bitter. Off bottle. Sophie swayed, her glass slipping from her fingers to shatter on the rug. I feel dizzy, Claire gasped, hand to mouth. But it was Marguerite Leclerc who collapsed first. She slumped forward, glass tumbling, her face turning ashen. A thin froth appeared at her lips. Mon Dieu! Dr. Leclerc leapt to her side, cradling her head. Marguerite, breathe! Chaos erupted. Madame Duval cried out. The Comte shouted for Henri. Poirot set down his untouched glass of 1928, though he had only sipped, and moved swiftly to the doctor's side. Poison, Leclerc muttered, checking her pulse. Arsenic, perhaps, or something faster. Her pupils are dilated, respiration failing. Marguerite convulsed once, then went still. Leclerc closed her eyes gently, his face stricken. The room froze in horror. Julien Favre backed away from the table. Sophie retched into a vase. Etienne staggered to a chair, pale but upright. Poirot scanned the glasses. His own 1928 showed barely a swallow missing. Etienne's was empty. Sophie's half full, spilled. Claire's nearly full. Leclerc's three-quarters gone. Marguerite's empty. And Madame Duval's. She had poured but not drunk, claiming a headache. Everyone, do not touch the glasses, Poirot commanded. Comte, lock the doors. No one leaves until I say." The Comte nodded numbly, bolting the salon doors. Henri burst in, summoned by the commotion, and was sent for water and cloths. Dr. Leclerc rose shakily. "How? We all drank from the same bottles." "Not all the same poison," Poirot said softly. "The 1928 was tampered with, selectively. Someone added toxin to specific glasses after pouring." Julien Favre stared. "But who? Elise poured for us all." Madame Duval, white-faced, met Poirot's gaze steadily. "I poured? Yes. But anyone could have approached the table while I fetched the decanter." Claire whispered, "The shadow? It warned us." Etienne laughed bitterly. "Or the poisoner striking again. First scares, now murder." Poirot knelt by the spilled wine, sniffing the stain. "Bitter almonds? No, something sharper. Not cyanide." He examined Marguerite's glass fragments carefully, gloved hands retrieving a shard. "Henri," he called, "fetch my valise from my room, and inform no one outside this house. The gendarmes will come, but on my terms." As Henri departed, Poirot began interrogating. "Dr. Leclerc, you poured nothing extra?" "Nothing. I drank the 1961 mostly, only a sip of the 1928. Sophie, Etienne, you drank quickly. Symptoms?" Sophie moaned. "Nausea, but fading." Etienne nodded. "Same." "Must have been a small dose." "Claire, I barely touched it." Her hands trembled. "Madame Duval, you drank none of the 1928. She shook her head. "No, I prefer the younger wines." Julien Favre spoke up. "I had the 1947 and 1961. The 1928 I only swirled." Poirot noted those with significant 1928 ingested were worst hit. But why Marguerite most severely? Henri returned with the valise. Poirot extracted a small test kit, chemical papers and vials he always carried. He swarmed the glasses, watching reactions bloom, positive for strychnine in Marguerite's shards, traces in Sophie's and Etienne's. "Strychnine," he announced, "rapid, convulsive, meant to kill quickly, but unevenly dosed. The poisoner expected panic to mask it." The Comte sank into a chair. "Who would do this? Marguerite was harmless." Dr. Leclerc's eyes hardened. "Someone who wants us gone. Or the wine. Or the chateau." Poirot turned to the group. "Alibis for the past hour, where each was before the tasting." Answers tumbled out. Comte in his study, Madame Duval in kitchen, Etienne in gardens with Sophie, Claire reading, Julien writing letters, Leclerc walking, all unverifiable without witnesses. As dusk fell, the local doctor and gendarmes arrived, summoned discreetly by the Comte. Poirot cooperated fully, yielding the glasses but requesting time. The body was removed, statements taken. In the library later, alone with the Comte, Poirot revealed more. The hidden passage leads to tunnels under the vineyards, old smuggling routes perhaps. I found scratches on the walls, fresh, and in the dust, fibres from a dark cloak, matching the shadow's silhouette. The Comte paled. Then the poisoner hides there? Possibly. But poisoning requires access to the kitchen, or the cellar where Henri fetched the bottle. Someone knew that 1928 would be open today. And the rose, the footprints, part of the theatre, to build fear, then strike amid chaos. The Comte gripped the desk. "My family! Who among them?" Poirot stroked his moustache. "That, mon ami, is for my little grey cells. Motives abound. Inheritance for Etienne, perhaps. Greed for Favre. Secrets for your sister. Sorrow for Claire. Even jealousy in the Leclercs." Outside, rain began to patter against the windows. The chateau felt smaller, the shadows longer. Murder had entered Chateau Vignoble. Not a ghost, but flesh and blood. And Hercule Poirot would not rest until he named the hand that poured the poison. Chapter 6. Hidden Passages and Secrets. The rain that had begun the previous evening continued into the next day, a steady downpour that turned the gravel paths to mud and cloaked the vineyards in grey mist. Château Vignoble felt besieged, not by an army, but by suspicion. The gendarmes had come and gone, taking statements and the poisoned glasses, promising a full investigation. But everyone knew the real work now belonged to Hercule Poirot. He had risen early, breakfasting alone in his room on black coffee and a perfectly ripe pear. By 9 o'clock he was back in the cellar, equipped with a powerful electric lantern, a ball of twine, and the iron key the Comte had entrusted to him. The house above was quiet. The guests kept to their rooms or the library, speaking in whispers when they met. Poirot entered the old section alone. The air was colder than before, heavy with damp. He went directly to the concealed panel he had discovered the previous day. The iron ring yielded easily now that he knew its secret. The narrow door swung inward on well-oiled hinges. Someone had maintained it recently. He tied one end of the twine to a rack outside, then stepped into the passage. The lantern beam revealed rough-hewn stone walls glistening with moisture. The floor sloped gently downward, the footprints he had seen before now blurred by his own passage yesterday. He advanced cautiously, paying out the twine behind him like Theseus in the labyrinth. After 20 meters, the passage widened into a small chamber, perhaps 3 meters square. Here the walls were smoother, as though worked by skilled masons long ago. In one corner stood an ancient wooden chest, iron-bound and padlocked. Dust lay thick upon it, undisturbed for decades, except for a single clear handprint on the lid. Poirot examined the print closely. A woman's hand, small and delicate, the fingers slender. Claire, Sophie, Madame Duval. He could not yet tell. Against the far wall leaned a stack of yellow documents tied with faded ribbon. He knelt, careful not to disturb them unduly, and untied the bundle. The top sheet was a ledger page dated 1789, listing cases of wine hidden pour la postérité. Beneath it, however, were more recent papers. A handwritten will dated 1919, leaving the bulk of the estate to the Comte's father, but with a codicil benefiting a younger brother who had disappeared in the war. Then letters, passionate, desperate letters from a woman named Isabelle to the Comte's grandfather, pleading for recognition of their illegitimate child. Poirot's eyebrows rose. A family secret, long buried. The child would have been the Comte's uncle or aunt. Illegitimate issue meant excluded from inheritance, yet perhaps with a claim on the hidden wines. He photographed the documents in his mind, memorizing key phrases, then retied the bundle exactly as found. A narrow archway led onward. The passage continued, branching twice. Poirot marked each turn with chalk from his pocket. After another 50 meters, he heard the faint sound of dripping water. The tunnel opened into a natural cavern, perhaps 10 meters across, where a small underground stream trickled over stones. Here the air was fresher. A faint draught suggested an exit to the surface. On a flat rock someone had recently made a small camp. A folded dark cloak, the shadow's garment no doubt, a half-burnt candle, a packet of biscuits, and, most telling, a small glass vial with residue of white powder. Strychnine. Poirot pocketed the vial carefully in a clean handkerchief. Proof at last of the poisoner's lair. But whose? The cloak was nondescript, the candle common. The biscuits were from the chateau kitchen. Henri had mentioned buying that brand in the village. He explored further. One branch of the cavern led upward in a steep climb. After a difficult scramble, he emerged through a concealed hatch into a small stone shed at the edge of the vineyards, the old pressing house, long disused. The door was bolted from inside, the key still hung on a nail. Anyone familiar with the estate could come and go unseen. Poirot retraced his steps, following the twine faithfully back to the cellar. He closed the panel, erased his chalk marks, and ascended to the main house. The Comte was waiting in the library, his face haggard. Dr. Leclerc sat with him, a brandy glass untouched in his hand. "You have been gone 3 hours," the Comte said anxiously. "We feared—" Poirot raised a reassuring hand. "I'm intact, mon ami, and I bring news. The passages are extensive. Old smuggling tunnels from the days when taxes on wine were ruinous. They connect the old cellar to the vineyards. Your shadow has been living there, coming and going at will." He described the chamber, the documents, the cavern lair, and finally produced the vial. Leclerc examined it gravely. "Strychnine, yes. Enough left for several more doses." The Comte buried his face in his hands. "Then it is one of us. No outsider could know those tunnels." "Not necessarily," Poirot replied. "Someone who grew up here would know. Or someone shown by a person who did." At that moment, Madame Duval entered, carrying a tray with fresh coffee. She paused, sensing the tension. "I thought you gentlemen might need this," she said quietly. Poirot watched her set the tray down. Her hands were steady, but he noticed a faint scratch on her right wrist, fresh, perhaps from brambles near the pressing house. "Merci, madame," he said. "You are always thoughtful." She inclined her head and withdrew. Poirot turned back to the men. "This afternoon I will speak to each person privately. But first, I must see the gardens, the rose bushes in particular." The rain had eased to a drizzle. Poirot donned his overcoat and walked the paths alone. The rose garden lay behind the chateau, a formal parterre still blooming bravely despite the season. Deep red blooms predominated, hybrid teas and bourbons, heavy with scent. He examined the bushes carefully. On one plant, several stems had been cut cleanly with secateurs, the cuts fresh. Nearby, in the soft earth, he found a single footprint, narrow, like those in the cellar dust. A woman's shoe, size 37 perhaps. He straightened, thoughtful. Claire wore small shoes. Sophie too. Madame Duval favoured elegant low heels. As he turned to leave, he noticed something glinting in the mulch. A small silver locket, heart-shaped, half-buried. He picked it up carefully. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, strikingly similar to Claire, and on the back engraved, "To Isabel, with eternal love, 1918. Isabel. The name from the letters. Poirot closed the locket and slipped it into his pocket. Back in the house, he began his interviews in the small study. One by one they came. Etienne defiant and hungover, Claire tearful, denying any knowledge of tunnels, Sophie flirtatious but nervous, Julien Favre calculating, offering to buy the entire hidden stock to end this madness, Dr. Leclerc grieving and angry. Madame Duval came last. She sat opposite him, hands folded, expression serene. "You have been in the passages, madame?" Poirot asked directly. Her eyes flickered. "As a child, perhaps. I have not entered them in 40 years. And the roses? You cut them yesterday." "For the house," she said calmly, "as I always do." Poirot placed the locket on the desk between them. This was found in the rose bed. It belonged to Isabel. No. For the first time, her composure cracked. She reached out, then withdrew her hand. "My mother," she whispered. "She gave it to me when I was 16. I thought it lost years ago." Poirot leaned forward. Your mother was the illegitimate child of the old Comte, excluded from inheritance, yet knowing of the hidden wines. You grew up here, knowing the tunnels. And now, with debts perhaps or resentment. She met his gaze steadily, though tears stood in her eyes. I loved my brother Philippe. I would never harm him, or Marguerite. Yet someone did, and the handprint on the chest was yours. She was silent a long moment. I went there yesterday, after the poisoning. I wanted to see if the old papers were still there. I feared what they might reveal if discovered. And the cloak? The strychnine? Never. I swear it. Poirot believed her, partly. She had secrets, yes, but murder. He dismissed her gently. Dinner that evening was a sombre affair, served in near silence. The seats felt emptier without Marguerite's bright chatter. Dr. Leclerc excused himself early. Later, as the house settled, Poirot sat in the library with the Comte, laying out the documents and locket. Your sister is Isabel's daughter, he said quietly. She has a moral claim on part of the estate, perhaps, but she denies poison. The Comte stared at the locket. I knew nothing of this. Our father never spoke of it. Someone knows, Poirot said, and uses the tunnels to terrorize and to kill. Outside, the rain had stopped. Moonlight silvered the wet gardens. Poirot rose. Tonight I will watch the cellar. The shadow may return, and when it does, Hercule Poirot will be waiting. The Comte gripped his hand. Be careful, my friend. Poirot smiled. Careful? Always. But the little grey cells, they are never more alive than in the dark. He descended once more into the depths. Lantern dimmed, settling into the shadows to wait. The secrets of the past were rising like wine sediment stirred from the bottom of an ancient bottle. And soon, very soon, they would reach the surface. Chapter 7. The Gathering Storm. The storm returned with vengeance that night. Thunder rolled over the vineyards like artillery, and lightning illuminated the chateau in stark white flashes. Rain lashed the windows, turning the world outside into a blurred watercolour of black and silver. Hercule Poirot had not waited long in the cellar the previous evening. Shortly after midnight, he heard faint sounds from the hidden passage. Soft footsteps, the scrape of the panel opening. He had dimmed his lantern to a glow and stood motionless in the shadows. A figure emerged, tall, cloaked in black, face obscured by a dark scarf. It moved with purpose toward the false wall of 1789, carrying a small bundle. Poirot stepped forward silently, but a sudden crack of thunder masked his footfall poorly. The figure whirled, bundle dropping, and fled back into the passage. Poirot pursued, lantern swinging, but the narrow tunnel and his own caution slowed him. By the time he reached the cavern, the upper hatch was slamming shut. He emerged into the pressing house, soaked and empty-handed, the storm raging overhead. The bundle left behind contained only another red rose and a single sheet of paper. A crude drawing of a guillotine, with the initials CV beneath. Comte de Vignoble. A threat. Poirot had returned to the house at dawn, changed clothes, and said nothing yet to the household. He needed them unsettled, off balance. The storm would help. By late morning, the electricity failed. Lines down somewhere in the valley. Candles and oil lamps were brought out. The drawing-room became the gathering place, fire blazing against the chill. Tension crackled like the lightning outside. Dr. Leclerc sat apart, staring into the flames, grief etched deep in his face. Julien Favre paced, muttering about leaving for Paris as soon as the roads cleared. Sophie clung close to Etienne, who drank brandy steadily from a crystal tumbler. Claire embroidered in a corner, needle flashing, but her stitches were uneven. Madame Duval moved among them with quiet efficiency, offering coffee, brandy, small sandwiches, maintaining order as always. The Comte summoned Poirot to the library first. "You saw the intruder?" he asked urgently. "Yes, tall, slender, quick. I could not identify the face, but the threat, this drawing, was meant for you." The Comte's hand trembled as he took the paper. "Guillotine, revolution. Someone wishes me to feel what our ancestor felt, betrayed, hunted." "Or wishes us to believe that," Poirot replied. "The theatre continues. Fear is the weapon now, as much as poison." They returned to the drawing-room together. The group fell silent as they entered. Poirot took the centre, near the fire, his small figure erect, moustache impeccably waxed despite the night's adventure. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began quietly, "it is time we speak plainly. A murderer walks among us. Marguerite Leclerc was poisoned. Threats are made. Shadows appear and vanish. All this is connected. All this has motive rooted in the past of this house." Eyes turned to him, wary, defensive, afraid. "Yesterday I explored the tunnels fully. I found documents proving that Madame Duval is the granddaughter of an illegitimate child of the old Comte, a child excluded from inheritance, a secret long buried." Gasps rippled. Madame Duval went very still, but she did not deny it. Etienne laughed harshly. "So Aunt Elise has royal bastard blood? How fitting! Does that mean she wants the estate now?" "Silence, Etienne," the Comte snapped. Poirot raised a hand. "There is more. The tunnels were used by the poisoner. Strychnine was hidden there, a cloak, food stolen from the kitchen. Someone has been living secretly beneath our feet." Sophie shivered dramatically. "Living? Like a rat?" "Like a person with purpose," Poirot corrected. "And last night that person returned. I pursued, but lost them in the storm. They left this." He held up the drawing of the guillotine. Claire dropped her embroidery with a small cry. "It's him, the lost Comte, come back for revenge." "Non, mademoiselle," Poirot said firmly. "No ghost draws on modern paper with modern ink. No ghost needs strychnine." Dr. Leclerc spoke for the first time, voice raw. "Then who? Who hated Marguerite enough to kill her?" "Perhaps no one hated Madame Leclerc," Poirot said. "Perhaps she was not the true target. The poison was in the 1928 vintage, poured unevenly. Several tasted it. Etienne, Sophie, Claire, yourself, Doctor. Only Madame Leclerc drank deeply enough to die. An accident of enthusiasm." Julien Favre stopped pacing. "You're saying the poison was meant for someone else?" "I'm saying possibilities. Etienne, perhaps, whose inheritance might be threatened by old secrets. Or Claire, whose return from Paris stirred memories. Or even the Comte himself, had he chosen that glass." The Comte blanched. Etienne slammed his glass down. "This is absurd! You're accusing all of us." "I accuse no one, yet," Poirot replied calmly. "But alibis are weak, motives exist. Greed for the hidden wines, worth millions. Resentment over inheritance, secrets of blood and birth, even love turned sour." He looked deliberately at Etienne and Sophie, then at Claire. Claire's cheeks flushed. "What do you mean? In Paris, mademoiselle, you ended an engagement, I believe, to a young man whose father does business in wine. A young man who might feel betrayed." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "That has nothing to do with this." "Perhaps not, but everything connects in a murder." Thunder boomed overhead, shaking the windows. Madame Duval rose. "Enough, Monsieur Poirot. You are tormenting us all. My parentage is my affair. I have never harmed anyone here." Poirot regarded her steadily. "Yet you knew the tunnels. You left a handprint on the chest. You cut roses that appeared as offerings. I went to see the old papers, yes, to protect my brother from scandal. The roses, I cut them for the house. Someone else must have taken them. Convenient, Etienne sneered. The Comte stood. Etienne, I will not have this. We are family. Family? Etienne's voice rose. You mean the legitimate ones. The ones who inherit everything while I drown in debts my father left, while Aunt Elise hides her bastard claim. Madame Duval turned white. Dr. Leclerc rose unsteadily. Boy, you go too far. Sophie tried to pull Etienne back to his seat, but he shook her off. And you, Favre, he shouted, turning on the merchant. You've been sniffing around the hidden stock since you arrived, ready to buy cheap from a frightened man. Julien Favre drew himself up. I am a businessman, yes, but not a murderer. Liar! Etienne lunged forward. The Comte and Dr. Leclerc seized him. Chaos threatened, voices raised, accusations flying. Poirot clapped his hands sharply. Assez! Enough! Silence fell, broken only by the storm. You all behave like children in a nursery, he said sternly. The murderer wishes exactly this. Division, panic. United, you are safe. Divided, the next stroke falls. He paused, letting the words sink in. Tonight we remain together. No one goes alone to rooms or cellar. We stay here or in the salon with lights and company. Tomorrow, when the storm clears and the gendarmes return, I will have more. But for now, calm. Slowly, the group subsided. Etienne slumped into a chair, head in hands. Sophie comforted him. Claire retrieved her embroidery, hands shaking. Madame Duval poured more brandy with mechanical precision. The Comte approached Poirot quietly. Do you truly know who it is? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The little grey cells arrange the facts, mon ami. Pieces fit almost completely. One more night, perhaps the murderer will try again. And then the trap closes. Outside, lightning flashed again, revealing for an instant the dripping vineyards and the dark bulk of the pressing house in the distance. Inside, the storm among the guests had quieted to an uneasy truce. But Hercule Poirot knew. The true gathering storm was almost at its peak. One more move by the killer, and the clouds would break, revealing everything in the clear light of truth. Chapter 8. The Light of Revelation. The storm broke just before dawn. By mid-morning the sky had cleared to a washed-out blue, and sunlight poured through the tall windows of the grand salon, glinting off the crystal chandelier and warming the ancient flagstones. The air carried the clean scent of wet earth drifting in through open doors. Hercule Poirot had requested that everyone assemble at 11 o'clock. No excuses, no delays. The gendarmes had been informed and would arrive later, but this denouement belonged to him. The party gathered slowly, reluctantly. Dr. Armand Leclerc entered first, hollow-eyed from grief and sleeplessness, and took a chair near the window. Julien Favre followed, impatient, checking his pocket watch. Sophie clung to Etienne's arm. The young man looked pale and unsteady, but sober for once. Claire sat beside her uncle, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Madame Duval stood at the rear, composed as ever, though her eyes were red-rimmed. The Comte de Vignoble closed the doors himself and took his place at the head of the room. Poirot stood in the centre, small and immaculate in a charcoal suit, his moustache waxed to perfection. He surveyed them all with calm green eyes. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice precise and carrying, we have reached the moment of truth. A woman lies dead. Threats have been made. Terror has reigned in this house. But order always triumphs over chaos. The little grey cells have done their work." He paused, letting silence settle. "First, let us dispel the supernatural. There was never a ghost in the cellar, only a living person who wished us to believe in one. The shadows, the roses, the guillotine drawing, all theatre, designed to evoke the revolution, to make the Comte fear retribution for old sins." The Comte shifted uncomfortably. The hidden passages allowed access. The cloak, the strychnine, the footprints, all human. But why? Motive is always the key. He turned to Madame Duval. "Madame, your secret is no longer secret. You are the granddaughter of an illegitimate child, excluded from inheritance. Many would say you had reason to resent your brother, to claim what was denied your mother." Madame Duval lifted her chin. "I have never denied my blood, but I have never sought more than Philippe's affection, which he has always given freely." Poirot inclined his head. "I believe you, madame. You entered the tunnels to protect old papers, not to poison." He turned to Etienne. "Monsieur Etienne, you have debts, resentment, a belief that the estate should rescue you. You drink too much and speak too freely. Many times you could have tampered with bottles, threatened your uncle." Etienne flushed angrily. "I've been drunk, yes. Stupid, yes, but murder? Never." Poirot's gaze moved on. "Monsieur Favre, you covet the hidden wines, millions of francs. A frightened comte might sell cheaply." Favre bristled. "Business, Monsieur Poirot, not murder. Dr. Leclerc, grief makes men desperate, but you were grieving after the crime, not before." Leclerc said nothing, staring at the floor. "And the young ladies, Sophie, ambitious, Claire, wounded by love." Claire looked up sharply. Poirot raised a hand. "But the true motive is not simple greed or inheritance. It is something older, more twisted, betrayal." He reached into his pocket and produced the silver locket. "This belonged to Isabelle, your mother, Madame Duval. Inside, her photograph. It was found in the rose bed. But it was not lost by accident. It was planted there, to be discovered, to direct suspicion toward you." Madame Duval's eyes widened. "The roses themselves," Poirot continued, "were cut by you, madame, for the house. But one was stolen from the arrangement in the hall and carried below as an offering, again to implicate you." He turned slowly to Claire. "Mademoiselle Claire, you knew the tunnels from childhood games. You are small, slender, able to move quickly in the narrow passage. The handprint on the chest was yours, not Madame Duval's. You left it deliberately when you moved the papers, knowing they would reveal your great-aunt's secret." Claire went very pale. "No, Poirot's voice softened but did not relent. "You returned from Paris heartbroken. Your fiancé ended the engagement when he learned of the family's clouded history, the illegitimate line. He feared scandal, or perhaps his father feared it would affect business. You blamed the secret itself. You blamed the house that kept it. And most of all, you blamed the Comte, your kindly uncle, who, in your eyes, had preserved the legitimate line at the expense of truth." Claire began to tremble. "You devised the plan. Create a ghost of the revolutionary past. Frighten everyone. Drive your uncle to sell or flee. Then, when fear was not enough, you escalated to murder. But not to kill your uncle directly, too obvious. Instead, poison the rare vintage during a tasting you knew would happen. You added strychnine to several glasses after Madame Duval poured, trusting that in the confusion someone would die, and the house would become unbearable." Tears streamed down Claire's face. "I didn't mean, I only wanted them to leave, to stop pretending everything was perfect. Marguerite drank so much, I never meant her to die." Sophie gasped. Etienne stared at Claire in horror. Poirot continued relentlessly. "The shadow was you, in the cloak from the attic. The footprints, your narrow shoes, the strychnine. You obtained it in Paris, claiming it was for rats in your apartment. The guillotine drawing, your final threat to force your uncle to abandon the chateau." The Comte rose slowly, face ashen. "Claire, ma petite, why?" She sobbed, covering her face. "Because everything here is a lie. The perfect family, the perfect wines, the perfect name. My fiancé left me because of the whispers about Grandpère's mistress. I wanted it all exposed, burned away. I thought if everyone was terrified, you'd sell, and we could all be free of it." Madame Duval moved to her side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Chérie, freedom is not bought with poison." Dr. Leclerc spoke hoarsely. "Marguerite died for this childish revenge?" Claire collapsed fully then, weeping uncontrollably. Poirot signalled to the Comte, who opened the doors. Two gendarmes entered quietly. They had been waiting in the hall. As they led Claire away, she did not resist. The room remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Poirot spoke again, gently now. "The shadows in the wine cellar were never supernatural. They were cast by pain, old pain, new pain. But light has entered. The truth is known. The house will heal." He turned to the Comte. "Your niece needs help, mon ami, not hatred. The secrets of the past need no longer weigh upon the present. Perhaps it is time to acknowledge all the branches of the family tree." The Comte nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. "Yes, it is time." Outside, the sun shone brightly on the wet vines, and the air smelled of earth reborn. Hercule Poirot allowed himself a small sigh of satisfaction. Another puzzle solved. Another triumph for order and reason. He adjusted his hat, bid polite farewells, and stepped into the waiting car that would take him to the station. Behind him, Chateau Vignoble stood bathed in light. No shadows now, only clarity. And somewhere in the ancient cellar, the priceless bottles rested undisturbed, waiting for a future unclouded by the ghosts of yesterday.